Awesome. Ken and I are super excited for our presentation for you today. There will be a fun little game. We're going to talk to you about competition and resilience. And I'll let Ken start off.
And we're not going to quote Michael Jordan.
And we're not going to quote Michael Jordan.
All right.
Karen's leaving.
That's what I paid for. Yeah. Time to go.
Notice this is session 2 of we don't know how many, and so if there are things that come up today that you think, hey, maybe you'd like to follow this up in a future session, we're still open for doing this for as long as you're open to listening to us. So, how can we make failure dead on arrival? Isn't that beautiful? I watched it for like 3 minutes solid. Should we do that as well? No, because persistent, resilient, focused, not just words. They're adjectives. Thank you. We'll take questions out in the lobby. I feel so bad because we promised you a game in the lead up to the first session. We even had a game for you, and then we kind of ran out of time. So we said, we're going to do the game first, okay? And you are going to be so thrilled with the technology behind this game. Okay? Look. Different color on each side. So everybody gets a card with a green side and a purple side. When I first learned this game, it was called the green and white game. We're going to call it the green and purple game.
Why is that?
Now, you're going to probably want to be able to see each other, so at least Brian needs to sit up, probably. Okay. And then I think, you're going to be holding the card up, and so maybe when we do it, kind of hold it over your head and make sure that only one side is showing.
And I will have to count everyone's colors, so hold them up until I say, okay.
Yeah, so you got to hold them up there. So, let me read the instructions. You are about to participate in a simulation situation in which we will pretend, sorry, it's only pretend, that real money is involved. Act as though real money were involved. The amount of money you will receive on each trial will depend, in part, on which card you raise up when I say now. It will also depend, in part, on which color cards others hold up. After each trial, I will write on the board, there, the numbers of people raising purple and green cards, and the values for purple and green. The values for purple and green depend on the number of people raising purple and green. That's great. People who raise one color, always the same color, will get more money than those who raise the other color. However, the more who hold up the color with the higher value, the lower the values will be for both cards, both colors. You are not allowed to talk. I'm looking at you. You're not allowed to talk or ask questions. Okay? After each trial, it says to write it down, but you don't have anything to write on. So remember how much money you made. Okay? Depending on whether you raised white, purple or green. Try to make as much money for yourself as possible. Okay? I'm allowed to repeat these instructions. Would anybody like me to repeat them?
Is this the kind of thing that if we do it, we'll figure it out?
We'll find out.
Nope.
No questions. Oh, right.
We'll find
No
out.
questions.
All right. We're going to write, I think, with the red one.
Okay, I'll count them and then tell you how many, and you'll write it down.
Actually, how about you write it down, because I'll tell you.
Okay.
Yep, change of plans, Rory's gonna write. All right, everybody ready? Trial 1. Now. Oh. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 green. That's 28 for purple. Oh, that's hard to see. Let's go back to blue. So 28 for purple. 26 for green. All right, 28 for purple, 26 for green. Ready? Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's the same, right? Is that 9 again? Yep, same thing. 28 for purple, 26 for green. Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Some change. That'd be 25 for purple, 23 for green. All right, so, and we can actually, if we can turn it around so they can to remember, so we can see the pattern here. Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So same, 8. So again, 25 for purple, 23 for green. Now. That's what I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Going down by 1. Every 2. That's a pattern we're seeing. So with 7, we got 22 for purple, 20 for green. 22 and 20. Ready? Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, now we're going faster. 6. That's going to be 19 for purple. 17 for green. Is that number 6? Okay. Now. 1, 2. 2? Is that right? Wow. Dropping off a table here. 7 for purple. 5 for green. Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Huh, interesting. Okay, back up to 6 here. 19 for purple. 17 for green. Now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, same thing, right? So 6 again.
So 19 and 17.
Yep, 19. So 19 for purple, 17 for green. Now. 1, 2, 3. All right. So 3 is 10 for purple, 8 for green. You can talk now.
This is Rick.
All right.
Purple.
Talk to purple rocks. So talk amongst yourselves.
The more people who do purple, the less everybody gets.
Right, exactly. And
So if everybody goes green, we all get more than if everybody goes purple.
Ah,
all right.
okay.
So if we're competing against each other, we're better off with purple. If you just want to make more money, go green.
Exactly, yeah, like it's not about who gets the most, well, is it about who, if you're the one who ends up with the most money, or if you're the, or if you get more money in general? Like, it's better to have
All right,
more money
ready?
than to be the one who wins.
Yeah, I'm on the money.
So are we
Give it a
all
try.
green?
Now.
Green.
Now.
Oh.
All right. So we've got how many people we have here? Because I only see one purple. So
Somebody's
13.
13 total, or is it
somebody's
13?
not, it seems like.
Yeah, that's right.
14
for
green.
green.
All right, so it is right 13. 40 for purple. 38 for green.
Yeah.
Want to talk?
Hmm.
Is this, sorry,
Yeah, you can talk. Yeah. You can say whatever you want.
is this similar to the prisoner's dilemma?
I don't know. I'm not going to
Yeah,
answer
it's
you.
a
That's them.
prisoner's dilemma.
Okay. If this were the prisoner's dilemma, B just murdered someone.
So she's winning.
We got to, oh, let's see. Now. All right, so now we've got 2 purple,
So it'd
so
be 12.
37 for purple, 35 for green.
How do we convince the purples to turn green?
Well, I'm gonna beat the shit out of her. She's under control.
All right, so we have threats of violence. We have implied violence. Any other comments? What are we on here? And we only have space for 3 more trials here, so.
Maybe we all go green on the second to last one, just to see what happens, and then the last one we can all party.
I mean,
Okay.
I would tell the people
You
who are
gotta
choosing to
convince
be
me.
purple right now, you're creating distrust and chance everyone else. That's right.
And
That's
we
right.
just don't like you as much anymore.
We're not pointing, calling names.
Now.
My table.
All right, now purple. Those are both green.
Maybe I should always know.
Interesting, it's changing around here. Okay? The same number is here, so 40 and 38.
It's like, nobody likes
So,
Just kidding.
No surprise.
um,
That's a little,
quick comments, because we need to wrap
That was
this up.
40 for purple?
Pardon me?
that was
40 and 38. Yep.
40 to 30.
40 for purple, 38 for
How much we got? 2 more?
yeah.
2 more?
So is this gonna be the all green one?
Yeah, let's do all green here. Just see what
Yeah,
happens.
ready?
Or not.
Now.
Oh, right. So
Brian's like, I don't give a damn.
All right, so same thing, 40 and 38. Let's do one other, just to fill it out here. Last one.
Green.
Now. That purple as well?
3 of them.
3 of them. 3.
So it'd be
Okay.
11.
So 34 and 32. Okay. I first learned about this game, I would say close to 25 years ago when I first started teaching. And I was teaching actually a leadership development workshop for honor students actually up in Lake Geneva. And interestingly, got this from Instructors Resources, I could never get the thing to work the way they said it was supposed to work, right? And so y'all kind of caught on at the early parts when you weren't allowed to talk to each other. You saw, hey, if I, or at least most of the right? So if I do purple, I'm gonna get more money, right, than the people who do white. And so, as you saw in the early stages, the number of people who raised green pretty steadily moved down. And if we had kept going, it probably would have gotten close to 0, because it got down to, I think it got down to 1 or 2 once, and then it popped back up a little bit, right? Then we let you talk, and then Matt actually said something that is exactly right, right? And that is, if you had all raised green, all of you would have gotten more money, right? Including the people who continued to raise purple. You would have gotten more money, right? Right? Because the way it works is that for each additional person who raises green, the amount of money goes up by 3 for the people who raise green. But the amount of money you get by raising purple over green is only 2 more. So if you had gone green, you would have gotten 3 extra instead of 2 extra. Okay? So indeed, everybody raising. Oh, and by the way, if everybody raises purple, if everybody raises green, there is nobody raising purple to get the $2 extra, right? And so the way to get the most money is to raise green. I have never, ever had a group do that, right? Never in the dozens of times I've done this, right? That the pattern that we saw here was not identical, but similar, where we'll have maybe just one or two for a while, but then once, if we had gone for a little bit extra trials here, it's likely that people would have increased the numbers of purple, right? So we'd go back, and people essentially losing money, right? Just to beat each other. Right? So by getting more for ourselves, we're actually getting more for ourselves relative to everybody else, right? We end up losing, right? Has that been up there for a while?
I just switched
Okay,
over.
just put it up there. Let's think for a minute, and we gotta go quickly. I apologize for this taking a little bit longer. About the goal of competition. I think one way to do that is to think about the actual definition, okay? And so if you were to pick up a dictionary, which I did to do this, our current definition of competing is to strive to outdo another for acknowledgement, a prize, supremacy, profit, etc. Engage in a contest, vie, right? In other words, in a competition, there is one winner and a whole bunch of losers, right? The whole goal of competition is to beat the other guy. That's actually not what the word means, okay? The word actually comes from Latin, competere, right? It means to seek together, right? It means when you're in a competition, the whole point is for you to find the best in yourself by putting yourself up with other people that you're competing with, right? Together, you're trying to find the best in yourself through competition, all right? I think this is something that's endemic to our culture, where we have changed fundamentally the meaning of competition to be one winner and the losers. We all lose that way, right? Because if, this is now we're going to get to things leading toward being able to be more resilient. If you go to a competition and it made you try the rig an extra time than you would have, that's a success. Right? If you learned that your nutrition plan didn't work, that's a success. Right? We're going to see a few steep inclines if we're going to be at Worlds next year, right? If we stay up there for 30 seconds longer than we would have in training, that's a success. And how about this one? If the person you're competing with sets a PR, that's a success, right? That's not me saying this. That's by definition. That's what competition means in the original Latin definition, right? So, by at least partially reframing, I mean, I love to win too, right? Don't get me wrong. But if we can at least partially reframe competition to see all these multiple ways that we can make it successful, harkens back to a comment that Rory made in the first session about she always finds a victory, right? And it will lead us to be more able to be resilient, as we're going to lose some of those negative emotions from thinking of I lost, right? So, want to do this?
Sure. So, kind of with that, I'm actually going to pop back. There's one more thing I was going to say here. When you reframe competition, the reason it makes you more resilient is because there's not one outcome, right? You weren't working necessarily for one thing. So if there's only one goal, you a very small margin for success. Whereas if there are multiple things that you can pull from it, your resiliency actually goes up because your anxiety is going to go down, because it's not, everything doesn't come down to one moment, one breath, one obstacle, one time. So there are a couple facts about failure. These are going to be shockers. It sucks. It's inevitable. But for today's purposes, we would actually like to switch it and call it adversity. We want to think of failure as adversity. And we'll get a little bit more into the definition of resilience. But when you look at failure as an adversity, it is now not a set, concrete fact. It is actually something that you can contend with and use to your overall advantage. Failure obviously includes different obstacles. There are setbacks, perceived and actual. And that's actually a big thing, is kind of like in the moment, our perception of failure versus like the actual standing of where we're at, and being able to moderate both of those. In our previous one, we talked about like when you get really anxious, you can either use that energy to your advantage, or that energy actually slows you down and pulls you down. And resilience is going to be your main use of that energy, so that your performance goes back to the level as if you hadn't experienced any stress. You want to do the next one?
Okay. Even if you're not a basketball fan, we're in Chicago, so you probably know a bit about Michael Jordan. He's very famous for overcoming some obstacles. He was cut from his high school basketball team. He does have some famous quotations about resilience, but we are not going to quote him, because we're going to quote Scott Carey. I heard that.
Exactly.
I heard that. Who? Scott Carey, otherwise known as the Incredible Shrinking Man. 1957, science fiction movie. If you've never seen it, I am about to reveal some very important plot points. So if you think you might see it someday, you won't hurt my feelings. Okay. So in the beginning of the movie, he's on a boat. He kind of floats through this cloud of, I believe it's a combination of nuclear something and pesticides. And he starts shrinking. Right? And with every day that he shrinks, he faces a new set of challenges, a new set of obstacles, some new adversity. And so throughout, he first has kind of interpersonal relationships adversity. He now looks more like his wife's child than his wife's husband, and has to navigate and rebound to having a normal relationship with her. But he keeps shrinking. And so not too long after that, he's small enough that they put him in a dollhouse, and he's living in a dollhouse. And his new obstacle is the family cat. Right? The family cat thinks he's a mouse and wants to eat him. Right? And turns out he doesn't fully recover from this one, because the cat actually knocks him down to the basement, and everybody thinks he's dead. And now he's stuck in the basement. But he keeps shrinking. Right? And so eventually, here's the exciting climactic part of the movie. He has to fight a spider, right? And he does so. He finds a pin, I believe. Is he holding a pin? Yeah, so
Yeah,
he's holding a
looks like
pin
he is.
as a sword, and he stabs the spider with a pin, right? So at every step, he finds himself facing extraordinary odds, extraordinary adversity, and he's resilient. He's able to come back. He even talks about his resilience, right? Now, my prison, almost as far as I could see, a gray, friendless area of space and time. This is the basement. I resolved that as man had dominated the world of the sun, so I would dominate my world. Right? We're going to define thriving in a couple minutes, but he actually is thriving even. So he says, continuing to shrink to become what? Still a human being? Or was I a man of the future? Right? Something more. And then toward the end, felt my body dwindling, melting, becoming nothing. My fears melted away, and in their place came acceptance. Okay? This looks like a B-rated, cheesy science fiction movie. It's actually a pretty thoughtful movie. And so, although I just spoiled it for you, I do recommend it. It's really good. Okay? So, you want to take the main?
Does this note come up for this one if we switch it over?
It won't stay, so
Okay.
because that's stuff you wanted to say. So.
Yeah. So competition, it kind of, I said before, if it ends up being about one specific outcome, i.e. let's just say winning. Most of us probably don't want to show up to a race and not think about standing on a podium, right? But if you, let's say that happens and you check the mark, you are less likely to review what you did in your race, which means you can have a perception of success that doesn't actually translate to overall progress. So if your competition doesn't lead you to review what you're doing, i.e. if winning is the goal, you get that goal, you check that mark and you move on. You actually didn't learn anything, so you're not taking anything with you into the next race. If you only have one set outcome, you're also as well limiting your idea of what you can really do. So we like to talk about paces and fuel and all of that, right? But it's majorly for this set outcome. So we don't then understand what we need to overcome things when stuff gets really hard. So if you're in a situation, things go really well, you check that box, you move on, you don't then know how to dig deep. That kind of translates into life kind of overall. If things kind of come easily or we don't feel adversity, then we don't actually gain more self-confidence. It's this weird thing how you end up needing to struggle and experience pain and things that are hard in order to learn how to manage those situations. And therefore our ability to experience what feels like a setback or an obstacle and overcome it is directly related to your overall self-esteem. And I would say ties straight into your overall confidence then on the race course. So if things kind of go smoothly, or we're just like, yes, we got what we wanted out of it, then you were less likely to review and be like, oh wait, here's what I could do differently, here's so on and so forth.
So, you know, we have a tendency often to think of adversity, failure as universally bad. We just don't, we want to remind you as we move into this that there's some actually things that are pretty helpful about it.
Yeah, one of them is that it increases your empathy and your humility. So I don't know if you've ever considered that, but I feel like when you go through tough things, you're more likely to relate to other people. You're more likely to see things from different perspectives. When obstacles are actually removed, people tend to grow more fragile. There's a term in psychology. It used to have what was called a helicopter parent, and now they're actually called lawnmower parents. They just coined this term. And the parent will move out in front of the kid and remove all the adversity in front of them. And then the kids become less resilient. So the ability to step into something that's really difficult, feel all of the feelings that come up, the stress, the worry, you start to overthink it all and then figure out a solution in the midst of that is what builds that confidence. It increases your skills and actually increases your ability to overcome said adversity.
Okay.
You want to keep going?
Yeah. So the idea of it being more, can be more informative than success. If you're successful, it's like, well, there are a dozen things I did, and I don't know which one of those are responsible for that. It's usually going to be easy to identify the thing that went wrong to make you be able to correct that. So more informative. And then the idea that 35 years ago, the first big theory on goal setting was developed. And since then, hundreds, actually thousands of studies have shown. You ever heard of SMART goals, right? Not all of that is super supported by research, but there are some key parts. One of the most important elements of a goal is that it be challenging, okay? Challenging enough that you're going to fail sometimes, right? goals, when you set goals that you're going to fail, performance increases. How often should that failure happen? In the research, it's 90% of the time. All right. Now, I'm not going to say let's set goals that we're going to only make 1 out of 10 times. It's really hard to kind of keep your spirits up if we're failing 90% of the time. But realize, I mean, just think of simple things. It happened to me yesterday. Doing an incline workout on a treadmill, and said, okay, for the last goal, I'm just going to go 100 feet. And I said, no, wait a minute. I know I can go 100 feet. I'm going to go 200 feet. Okay? And if I had said I'm going to go 500 feet, maybe I wouldn't have made 500 feet, but I probably would have made 350, right? And so, if we can set goals that we're not always going to make them, we can also realize, okay, I'm not upset about that. I didn't make 500 feet. And also keep in mind, if we're talking about workouts and you're always going to be setting goals that you're not able to reach, you do risk overtraining, right? So you want to make sure that that's not happening as well. But realize there's definitely some value to setting goals that you're not going to be able to achieve, right? And then
I was going to say, one of the things we talked about last time was optimal arousal. So it was like you have a low-level arousal, you have this optimal arc, and then you have high-level arousal that actually counts against you. When you're setting your goals, if you're not actually in something that's slightly stressful, if you just feel super calm and relaxed, you also don't learn how to manage those emotions of like pushing yourself. So if you set a really far goal that's maybe actually outside your capacity, you're going to be flooded, right? And then you're managing too much. But when you set realistic goals that still require a push, you're actually learning to use all of that energy and put it into something that when you get there, your confidence goes up. Versus if you kind of always stick with what you know, you don't have to manage those feelings of like, shoot, I didn't make it. I didn't get the 30 wall ball shots in a row. I didn't make the 200 feet. I only did 180. But then you also only stuck with 100 feet. And then that is your cap of your self-esteem, is like, that's where it ends.
okay, ready?
Yep. So things to keep separate for the idea of resiliency is we have actually 3 things here. Is we want you to look at it as there's resiliency, there's thriving, and then there's mental toughness. Resiliency being the mental skills to get your body back into a performance capacity pre-adversity or stress. Meaning the skills that you're going to use, you're going to come up to something, it's going to be hard, you're going to feel like you're set back, but you're going to have the mental wherewithal to get your body to perform as if that setback weren't there. Thriving, on the other hand, goes above that. You reach this new part, and maybe some of you have felt it before. It just feels like everything is flowing. Like you're in a good mood, everything is just flowing from there. And that mental toughness would kind of be consistent practice of both. One definition was unshakable perseverance and conviction towards some goal despite pressure or adversity. But that mental toughness is the habit that develops from resilience and thriving over time. Meaning you kind of combine the two, and then over time you reach that mental toughness.
Yeah. And so even if we're still at the point where we're working toward resilience, just being able to get back to where we were pre-adversity, it may be the case that your ultimate goal is, hey, I want to be mentally tough. I want to make this a habit and be able to be resilient and thrive over time, have this unshakable conviction. We have to realize what we're not saying with mental toughness. You want to do David Goggins a little?
Oh, the spiel about what he did, his one performance. So the one thing we're not saying is that you finish a race at all costs, no matter what, right? That's not the definition of mental toughness that we are promoting today. That sometimes you're in a situation where the particular outcome is not actually worth it, even if you could get there at all costs.
Okay. So, got a pretty dramatic illustration of this. So you do triathlons.
Sorry?
You do triathlons?
Triathlons, yeah.
Yeah. You know the Chris Lee story?
No.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Chris Lee was a world-class triathlete back in the late 90s and early 2000s. He's actually most famous for what you're about to see here. Okay? I will warn you, it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch. Okay? This is 50 meters from the finish line at the Ironman World Championships in Kona. I had hoped you'd be able to hear this because there's audio.
Oh, there is.
Imagine the crowd
Did you run the TV on?
cheering this. There it goes. Now, we thought it was important for you to see this because he kept going, right? And they cheered for him to keep going. And you might think, what's wrong with that? He almost died, right? He discovered early in the race that he couldn't pull down fluids. So he's doing an 11-hour race here with no hydration at all, right? He lost part of his large intestine because it died, right? And he almost died as a result of this, right? And sometimes you just have to realize it's not my day. You had another good story.
Well, I had one of the opposite
Yeah.
of Courtney DeWalter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys have perused YouTube. There are quite a few really interesting ultra running documentaries. But one of them was Courtney DeWalter. I don't know if any of you know who she is. I actually only figured out who she was because YouTube was like, hey, watch this video. And she is like the fastest up and coming ultra runner. So it was, I believe last year, she signed up to do back-to-back 100-milers. And by back-to-back, they were not like week back-to-back, but I think like just within a couple months of each other. Her and her friend ultra runner from France. And so they get started. And quickly she is like not feeling great. She's vomiting. 8 miles later, she's vomiting again. She gets to the next aid station 10 miles later, she's vomiting again, and she goes, I'm done. And she quit the race. And don't know how she felt at that moment, but upon interview was like, just not my day. I have no idea. My body just wasn't feeling great. Maybe there's something with my nutrition. I'll try to figure it out. So pulling herself out of the race, she rested up, and then she won the UTMB 100 shortly after, which is one of the hardest ultramarathons. And she ended up being like, yeah, it just wasn't my race. And I loved that approach. She didn't say, I'm a terrible racer, so on and so forth, but was able to evaluate in that moment. And to me, that was like such a phenomenal example of being very mentally tough while making a choice that we aren't classically taught to believe is mentally tough. It's like persevere at all costs. But I think it was actually one of the more mentally tough things was to be in tune with her body and be like, this isn't my race. And just to be okay with that.
Right? And so we're saying, sometimes the very best thing for you to do is to quit, right? Because mental toughness over the long term, right, is, you said shortly thereafter, like almost the next week, right?
Yeah, or I think it was within a couple months. Maybe
Okay.
it was like a month or so.
Okay.
I wouldn't run 100 miles 1 week after, well, I don't anyway, but could you imagine 100 mile and then turn around and do another one?
All right. So let's return to the left side of that little figure. Let's talk about some specific things that you can do to build resilience. And then it's really just a step above to get to thriving, and then over a long period of time, it becomes mental toughness. Okay? We're going to start with some very, very general, this was going to be me, with some general information about resilience from one of the most important researchers in this area. Martin Seligman is a former president of the American Psychological Association. He actually developed the subfield of psychology known as positive psychology. He notes, or noted, that almost everybody feels the same way when we experience adversity or failure, right? The idea we shared earlier, it sucks, right? You feel helpless, you want to give up, but there are certain people who are able to bounce back quickly, right? They're resilient, and others who aren't. And so he uses the idea of explanatory style, and he talks about an optimistic explanatory style and a pessimistic explanatory style. He usually uses the shorthand term of optimist and pessimist. We're going to keep saying explanatory style because it doesn't mean exactly the way we use optimism and pessimism in regular conversation. Okay? It's how do you explain, right, your adversity or your failures. Okay? So people who have the optimistic explanatory style, when they have a success, they're going to make internal, general, and permanent explanations or attributions. Internal, success. With me, I did it. Okay? General, boy, I'm good at this, and I'm good at other things too. Right? And permanent, it'll last for a long time. If I have the optimistic style, when I experience failure, I'm going to say it's somebody else's fault or something else's fault. Right? It's an external explanation. I'm going to say, oh, it's just this one time here, there's one specific situation here, and it's not going to last. It can be temporary. People who have a pessimistic style, it's exactly reversed. Right? When they experience a failure, right, that's when they're going to say it's internal. It's all my fault. Right? And they're going to make it a general explanation as well. Not just this race, it's every race. I stink at everything. And sometimes it even goes beyond the very situation. You might think about being a failure as a parent or a partner as well. And then it's going to last forever. You have a success. Got lucky. Not that I did, right? Just this, this specific success here right now, and it's not going to last, right? We really like this distinction. It's very, very important. Tons and tons of research support for the importance of it. We do want to point out one thing about a difference between resilience and thriving. For the people who are optimistic, we want to be careful about making too much of an external explanation when we have failures. That's going to probably help you to be resilient. It'll help get you back to your pre-adversity level. You'll feel good about yourself. But we probably want thriving. We want to improve. So we do at times have to take responsibility for, hey, there was something I did wrong. Maybe my training was off, and so be careful with overdoing the external attributions of failures if your goal is thriving and mental toughness. To think about a way to implement this, to actually try and become more optimistic in your explanatory style, we can move to some techniques that Martin Seligman borrowed from Albert Ellis, one of the early cognitive therapists in the field. Were you going to do this one?
Yep.
Yeah.
You've probably heard of CBT in your time before, and they got their stuff from Albert Ellis. So what do we talk about when we say take responsibility for something? We don't mean I did a horrible job, I should have done better. That's what we're going for. We're going for how do I review something? Albert Ellis has this ABCD model. A lot of our defaults, he kind of noticed how our beliefs shape our thoughts and our outlook towards something, and then therefore our performance. So your adversity would be a race. I had a bad race. I'm terrible. I stink. I'll never be good at this. You feel all these feelings of despair, and then you kind of spiral into that. Ellis believed that our beliefs about an event create irrational beliefs. There's also a term called ANT, automatic negative thoughts, meaning when you experience something unwanted, you often have these automatic negative thoughts about yourself. If there's one thought, there are normally many. You can even use the analogy of like if there's one ant, you're going to see a whole bunch of ants. And so these automatic negative thoughts normally pop up whenever we are in a situation that feels really tough. And then in comes all of the beliefs about what it means for us to be in that situation. And then your performance is very much determined based on your beliefs. If you don't believe you can do it, you're going to feel all of that, and that's likely going to influence your outcome. You can also do the reverse, though, right? So adversity comes, you can catch that belief, and then you can change it. So if you think about that more optimistic style, you don't have to be like, yippee, I love this. This is, I missed that. No big deal. But like, okay, I'm learning. How can I try that again? Employ yourself. So we came up with five skills that you can develop, and 5 defaults that are likely to arise whenever you are facing situations of adversity. If there is an obstacle or you feel like you have failed. So we're going to go over these 5 skills and then also talk about the 5 defaults that you will likely notice. And congratulations, you're human. And I think you were going to do the first one for self-determined, right?
Right. Okay, so self versus other determined. Let's actually think about the default first in this case, right? So other determined. This is situations when, or people who have a tendency to think that stuff happens to them, people who are performing activities in order to receive some sort of external reward, to avoid some external punishment, right? And kind of think of people who are going to work just to get a paycheck, right? So this is other or externally determined. Self-determined, on the other hand, is people are choosing to do the things, and even choosing to do the things that they have to do, right? They feel like it's their choice. Self-determination is often considered strongly related to intrinsic motivation, where you're engaging in activities because you enjoy those activities themselves, right? Now, we got a lot of that here already, where we enjoy activities, but we may not enjoy some of the training, especially if we're doing particularly hard training. And so we can't always count on enjoyment to be able to do things. But there are characteristics that we can develop that will help us be more self-determined. Okay? One is developing exercising autonomy, right? So having choices in how we engage in things. Focusing on developing competence, developing mastery, celebrating small improvements as we see ourselves getting better, right? Everybody in here, you can probably look at how you were a year ago and how you are now, and with surgery being a kind of a mitigating factor here, but so from immediately post-surgery to now, I mean, just tremendous progress that we made. We're getting better and better and better. We're becoming more competent, and when we focus on that, we're becoming more self-determined. And then lastly, this one is kind of my favorite one because it doesn't even necessarily have to do with the activity, and it's something that can happen anywhere, and that is when we have good relationships with the people with whom we're engaged in doing these activities, we become more self-determined for the activities itself. That's what we've got here. I mean, the FLATliner Team, we are a team, we are a community, we are friends, we have good relationships with each other. It's going to actually help us be better athletes, right? As we become more self-determined.
A good question you could ask yourself is if you had nothing to show for it, would it still be worth it? It's a good way to kind of evaluate your self-determined skill. So the next skill is awareness versus avoiding. I don't know about you guys, but I believe my brain is hardwired that the moment something's difficult, it goes, let's see how fast we can get out of this. Which is maybe helpful in some situations. But awareness of what happens in you when you are in certain situations that you like, situations that you find uncomfortable, situations that you find more stressful, situations that you find scary, situations that you find painful. Understanding what your brain urges you to do is kind of invaluable. So developing this particular skill and not avoiding doing that. I've come up with a few ideas. One of them being, you can take a cold shower or an ice bath. So when I work with my clients, when they come in to see me for anxiety-related issues, I always send them home with this homework after we've built some lovely rapport. Not before, I don't think they'll come back. I send them home and I say, okay, we're going to get to know this voice of anxiety, right? Because it's barraging you all day long, it's taking up a lot of time, it's keeping you from things that you want to do, and you feel very helpless against it. One way to get to know this voice is you turn on that shower, you turn it to cold, and then I always ask them, did you put your hand in first? Did you just reach it? What was the thought? This is cold. I'll do this tomorrow. Was Rory really serious? Does she expect me to get in here? She said at least 2 minutes. I don't think I'm gonna last 2 minutes. I don't like this. No. I've had 2 clients in 10 years do this. Right. Because it's really tough. So taking a cold shower or an ice bath is a really good way to, they weren't athletes. I'd be slightly curious to know how many people who choose to do uncomfortable things, what the rate would be. Anyway, but it's a great way to get to know that survival part of your brain that comes in when you're stressed and it's like, let's get out of here, right? Because oftentimes our brain doesn't want to do things that feel difficult. So this is a great awareness training. You can sit and self-reflect and journal. Another personal favorite of mine. You sit down, you get to know yourself, you write about your week, you think about what thoughts came up, what feelings came up, and then what would you have wanted to do different? Is there something you could have done different? So on and so forth. You can also try something new. For a lot of people, trying something new is really uncomfortable because you don't know how you're going to be at it. You're out of your comfort zone, and then your brain is going to start talking to you. I'm excited about this. What if I don't do this? Are there people there that I'm going to know? What? And you just like pay attention to those thoughts. Something I wanted to make sure we talked about today, if we're going to talk about resilience, we kind of have to talk about the difference between when your body is in a challenge state versus when your body is in a threat state, because there is a physiological difference. So when you are competing, if you are excited, driven, and determined, your body is going to cue your adrenal glands. You're going to get rushed with adrenaline, and then that energy is actually what helps you to hone in your focus. It changes what part of your brain you're functioning out of and what kind of is online there. And your mind-body fusion is more increased, meaning if you're reaching for something, you're going to be more focused. Your body's a little bit more agile. If, however, you are in a threat state, meaning have you ever had that race or that training, like that class, and you just feel down and you're like, I'm already behind, this already sucks, I hate it, I don't want to do this anymore. Now you're actually in a threat state. And the way that our brains are wired is when you're in a threat state, your body is actually going to start to shut everything down, and now your body is going to release cortisol. And cortisol is not optimal for performance. Cortisol is your body's way of being like, oh my gosh, we need this because there's so much stress in our system. So cultivating the awareness of the way that your brain thinks when you're in tough situations allows you to be able to actually get your body to be in a challenge state where you are determined, you are focused, and all of your energy is going into the thing that you're doing. Instead of being in a threat state, they're already ahead of me, I'm probably not going to get there, they're going to get through that obstacle, and then I'm going to be behind and my whole race is ruined. Because then there's your cortisol, and then you are not operating in that optimal zone. The next skill is discipline. So in our previous one, we talked a little bit about overthinking. A great skill to hone in on your resilience and actually help to combat overthinking is discipline. If I were to give a definition of that, it's going to be consistency, practice, and that increases also your sense of confidence. Great things to build discipline around, or if you're wanting to increase that skills, you could do a 10-minute burpee EMOM. It's just like mentally, it just puts you in this. Like, it is doable, it is hard, it is always hard. You could play little games of like, did I get the burpees in 30 minutes or 30 seconds, 27, 25, so on and so forth. You can give up coffee. That'll spark so much awareness. Charlie is shaking his head. You can set a schedule for a week and stick to it. You will notice how your brain will try to talk you out of something. I'm tired, I don't want to do this, why did I sign up for this? And that's just your brain. If you take that as you, now you have to like fight with all of that. So learning how to recognize when something comes up and still be very disciplined, follow the thing that you said you were going to do, is building this resiliency skill, because you can separate yourself from your thoughts, which allows you to, it's actually you're externalizing your thoughts and your emotions at that point. You can follow through with something that you have planned, and that actually gives you a higher sense of control.
Okay, and then me?
Yep.
So with discipline, right, we're trying to get ourselves to do things that we don't want to do, right? And sometimes we become our own worst enemy here, where the obstacle is actually kind of in our own head, right? Maybe there's a particular workout we have to do and we don't want to do it. And we end up kind of habitually, although we don't have avoiding as our foil for this one, we end up avoiding things. There is a technique that's going to sound ridiculously simple. It's called implementation intentions. And what we're trying to do is build a habit of discipline. And so the idea is you take this trick here and you try and make it into a habit, okay? First, you're going to identify what are my mental obstacles. What are the things that kind of go through my mind when I'm going to bail out on a workout or not do what I'm supposed to do, right? And then we create a little if-then statement. Okay? So for me personally, I got if I don't feel like doing a run and I'm supposed to be running, then I'm going to put my clothes on. I'm going to change my clothes. I'm not committing to going to do the workout yet, to do the run. If I feel like I don't want to do it, I'm going to go upstairs immediately and change clothes. Okay? You don't want 100 of these, right? Because you're not going to be able to make it a habit if you have 100 of these. So you're going to identify what are the key mental blocks, mental obstacles that I've created for myself. And then you create these if-then statements and you implement them every time it happens.
It's your if trigger is I don't feel like doing this.
Yep.
It can be that general.
It can be that general. It's just something that's happening inside you, an emotion or a thought that you're experiencing. Okay? And you're thinking, come on, this is going to work. There are 100 studies that says it works. Right? 100 studies that when you commit to this, just having this habit, you will do more of the things that you don't want to do. Okay? I am one example, but don't just trust my experience. I trust 100 studies. So implementation intentions, good for building discipline.
Especially, yeah.
Can you, is this necessarily for behavior, or could you design implementation intentions for like mental behavior or thought patterns? Like if I fail an obstacle, then blah blah blah, or something like that. Or is this only for mental triggers?
What would be the then? So if I fail an obstacle, then
I mean, I am very guilty of the pessimistic explanatory style that you guys were talking about earlier, specifically with obstacles. So I'm trying to come up with that on my own.
Yeah.
But I am struggling a little bit with trying to adapt this, thinking like if there's a way that I can consistently design like a mental habit that I'm
yeah. So I like the if then to take where I'm at and get one step further. So if I don't feel like working out, it could be like if I don't feel like working out, maybe I'll put my clothes on. Or I like to do it if I run 30 more feet at this pace, then I can quit. Right? I think what you're asking about is an acknowledgement of where your nervous system is at. And that gets into a little bit more about emotional regulation, which maybe we can talk about, but I'll give you a quick kind of where my brain is thinking about this, is your brain has what's called a monitor. And so if you're like driving to the store and there's a lot of traffic and you had only planned on this trip being about 20 minutes and your GPS already says it's going to take 20 minutes to get there, your brain's going to be like, not worth it, right? The thing that I want takes too long to get there, so I just kind of want to be done. And that's twofold. That's because our brains don't like good returns on our investments. And that's also because we are built to feel stress, but we don't like to stay in a constant stress state. So your body is going to try to get you out of that stress state. So if you tend to be more on that pessimistic side of things, chances are you're often in a stress state. And so your if then, you might want to tweak it, which is like, if I don't really feel up for exactly what I planned today, what is the first smallest part of that I can do? And then I'll just kind of see how I feel, and maybe as I get going, I'll go. So my example for a run would be like, let's say I plan to run 10 miles, and I'm like, I don't feel like running at all. Okay. I'll just show up, maybe I'll walk, and then maybe I'll plan to run, let's get at least 3, and then if I feel better for more, I'll just keep going. So you take away the goal, which changes your stress, but you hold yourself to the discipline, which is like, I'm just gonna move. And so you are consistent in that discipline practice, but you do give yourself some flexibility, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next one might be one of my preferred. I love the idea of curiosity just in general, but a hallmark skill in owning and building a resiliency is curiosity. The default your brain is going to have is blame. So picture something not going very well. Majorly our brains are first going to go to this place of like, that was terrible, that person cut me off, the weather, my shoelace. It's going to have all of these reasons for why the outcome you wanted didn't happen, right? Curiosity, on the other hand, is the skill you can build in place of that, where you just say, huh. So curiosity is not something particular to a person. It is a mindset that is nurtured and adopted over time. A way you can do that is if you start to get anxious about something and be like, well, and then what's going to happen? Well, and then what's going to happen? So I do this with clients all the time. They'll tell me a fear scenario and why it means that they can't take action onto a particular thing. And I'm like, well, and then what's going to happen? And then they'll say, and I'm like, and then what? And they'll say something else. And you take it to its furthest out point, and normally by the time you get there, you realize this was just a little ridiculous, right? So back to Albert Ellis, and the idea of you kind of have these thoughts and these beliefs, and over time, they're slightly irrational. And so if you do the and then what, your curiosity can take over, you start to gain a different perspective, and things shift. Another way to build curiosity is just to ask a question, why? Not why did that happen from like a blame place, but like, oh, I wonder why that happened. Why did I feel this particular way? Like Courtney was asking herself when her race didn't go super well, she's like, maybe it was my nutrition, maybe it just was, but she got really curious. Curious enough that she came up with a few things, she tweaked it for her next race, she tried a bunch of food in between, and she won her next 100-miler. To build curiosity, you can go for a walk, and the idea is to have zero intention, but to just, what all can you see? You know, and you just, how much can you pay attention to the things around you in your brain when you give it that freedom will naturally actually increase its curiosity. And then you can review a past race. Just go to a race that you had, maybe you got a podium, maybe you set a PR, maybe you didn't do as well as you thought you were going to, and how can you cultivate that curiosity on from start to finish? What was it like to stand in the corral? What were you thinking when you did those obstacles? Are you curious about your pace or your nutrition or so on and so forth? There was one more point to this, wasn't it?
Did you say that?
No, I didn't. Or this one. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. That was about the walk.
You did say that.
I did.
Yeah.
So another thing, like if you were to take a walk, when I said just like, try not to focus on anything in particular. Do you guys ever remember being a kid and just like running around? And do you remember how like, you were just like in it? And you were curious about so many things. You would just like notice details. I feel like as an adult, you're in this rut and you're like, gotta go on to the next thing, you know, gotta go to the job and pay the mortgage, and you lose that childlike wonder where you were just excited by like, oh look, there's a caterpillar, and oh look. So when you can tap back into that, it's optimal if you can do it while you're racing. That's like hitting that thriving zone. It's where your eyes are open, you're seeing everything around you, and just get so curious about all of it. Okay.
Yeah. So next is character versus ego protecting. And we are not saying that some athletes have no character. We are saying that you kind of want to know what you value, right? Know what your values are, and leverage those character strengths when adversity hits, right? I think, so much of what we've talked about comes back to awareness. And so we're going to go back to another round of awareness. I don't think we often reflect in complete or an analytical way about what our personal character strengths are, right? Now, if you do, you don't need to hear this because, I already know. But since this is something that we don't often do, it can sometimes be helpful to have some kind of assistance, some kind of aid to do it, okay? I forgot to get something ready. Should I do it? Should I pull it up? It'll take about a minute to find it.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea is we're basically asking the questions: what are our strengths? What are our values? And then to be very, very conscious of them, because they are going to guide your thoughts. They're going to guide your behavior, and the more you think about them. Again, another I think key thing we want to emphasize here is the role of habit in this. So if we habitually return to our character strengths at the times when we're experiencing adversity, that's when we need it the most, and it's going to be there for us. Okay. So the thing I want to show you quickly, and these are both things, we're not going to do them here today, but we'll make the resources available to you if you'd like to try them on your own. PTK, that just stands for Phi Theta Kappa. This is this leadership development class that I told you about. Back years and years ago, they just had a card version of this. They'd hand out 35 cards with different character values, character strengths or values on it, and you just had to sort them, right? And just kind of going through that process and making decisions about which ones are important to you. It's a pretty valuable exercise. And then the importance of unimportant values that obviously you're not going to use those, but let me show you a version of it that I created. Yeah, and I'm sorry I forgot to get this ready.
Does anyone want me to pass Rory's cookies around?
Okay.
They're not cookies.
Well, I mean, they're.
That's
I
debatable.
think they're cookies.
Thank you. Okay, hold a green card if you think they're
I
cookies.
would also argue that they're delicious and not cookies.
Yeah.
But
It doesn't matter what they are, they're good.
It's not a cookie.
totally worth eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't care what they are,
Oatmeal
you eat
chocolate
anyway.
chips and
Oh,
peanut butter,
delicious.
they're called a cookie.
Tower there's food.
Okay, so
Yeah.
actually it was a good break. Right, so not super high tech, but so you can see the first one. I know the font's pretty small. It says it's helpfulness, and then you can mouse over on it, and when you pause, a little definition will pop up because some of them, they can be ambiguous, and so, and then the idea is that you can take one, and I think that helpfulness, that's something that's really important to me. I'm going to drag it over here, right? So you drag them over, but you're only allowed to have 5 in that toplet, in that top one, right? And then you can have others that are also important, and then ones that are not important. The first time I did this, there were 12 in my top 5, right? But I had to get rid of some of them, right? So we're really trying to force ourselves to think, what are the things that are really, really important to me? Because again, those are going to be your greatest strengths. Okay.
Is this the resource you're going to share?
Yeah. So I'll give you a link to that one if you want it. I actually think this next one I'll tell you is even better. All right. Can't see over my shoulder here.
Do you want to click on
That way. There we go. That'll do it. Okay. This next one is called Values in Action. minutes ago, one of his most famous students, Chris Peterson, developed this, character strengths. That group of psychologists were very heavily involved in promoting resilience, helping people develop resilience. So this values and action approach has actually been used to help people become more resilient. 24 instead of 35 possible values. And because it's the whole point that these were developed for resilience, you're going to be able to recognize that more. I mean, there's some of those ones in the PTK things, like power. I don't know. It's like, it's not really going to be my resilience promoting thing. And these are all going to be a much better, closer link for you. And then with the one that I showed you a minute ago, there are some things that you're going to say, no, that you're supposed to say are not important. Here, they will categorize them into high, what is it? Medium, high, and medium, right? Okay. So the idea, not that we're good at everything, but we have at least a degree of strength that extends beyond what might be obvious. And so it is a web page that you'll go to. It is free, but no quotation marks, because as soon as you fill it out, it will give you your results, but it will invite you to spend $50 to get an even better description of your results. But you can get a lot out of the free version. So strongly recommend it. To illustrate, let's do a values in action. I will share the results of a completely random athlete that you have never met before. So this completely random person that you've never met before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Strengths of fairness, perspective, honesty, creativity, perseverance, self-regulation, love of learning, curiosity, humility, hope, judgment, forgiveness, prudence, humor, kindness, appreciation of beauty and excellence, social intelligence, bravery, teamwork, love, gratitude, leadership, possessive spirituality. I look at this, I know this person quite well. Actually, it turns out the first column, second column, most of the third column are something that this person would actually think of as strengths. And then wrong about the social intelligence and bravery part. Those are things that are not so much. Yes, unfortunately, this person is not very spiritual. I don't know who that is. So the idea is that
Wait, I'm sorry, are those like in order of?
this is me. Okay?
I know, but they're listed, it's like top to bottom.
Yeah. So it'd be high, medium, high.
Yeah. What's that? Right. So for me, it's the kind of dividing point where I think things are not so important to me. Is around the appreciation of beauty and excellence part. That's where I think. So all above that, I actually do say, hey, these things are strengths of mine, and so that you notice the perspective, right? That's one that's going to help me in so many situations, right? Because I really, especially as I'm getting older, I want to be wise, okay, and have perspective on things, and so when I fail, I'm going to draw from that specific character strength as often as I can, right? What's some perspective that I can gain from this, right? What's some wisdom that I can gain that I might also be able to share with other people as a result of this? And love of learning. I kind of wish that one came up higher. I feel like it's something that's really important to me. And again, if I fail, I always will look for a way to learn from that because it is such an important thing to me. Having that large list just to think through, I can look through it and say, well, how can I use my humor, right, to be able to do this, and just to have this resource to come back to and remind myself of what my strengths are. Because again, we're not always conscious of them. We don't always think about them, and it feels kind of weird sometimes to talk if we're look how high humility is for me, okay? So it's kind of weird to stand up and talk about all these things that I'm great at. So, yeah, but,
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're like putting these in order, are you?
I didn't put them in order.
Oh,
It's a survey.
okay,
It's a
so
survey that
it's
you
a-
take.
got it, okay.
And I'm sorry, I didn't put that there.
Because
Yeah.
sometimes you take these personality quizzes and you're like, well, this is how I want to be, but am I
That's
actually like
really,
coming
really-
across?
That's a really important point. They do a pretty reasonable job, but you can often see through it.
Yeah.
So.
I took it as well, and when you go through, you can see they ask you the same question, like a lot of times, so they have the cross balances. I think perspective and like self-regulation were my top couple ones, and I probably feel like the top 6 were like, oh yeah, but they go from a bank, so like that's all of them, and then all the questions like categorize it based off of you, but those are the values.
I think I've actually taken something very
Yeah.
similar like,
Mhm.
many years ago at work, and I remember feeling like.
Yeah.
The
it's like
Strengths
wishful
Finders
thinking.
is pretty close to it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever taken Strength Finders. It's common for companies to use that one. It's a values based.
That's one
System.
that I took that one once and I said, I don't like my results, so I took it again and I answered the way that I wanted it to come up. So that one was easier to gain.
Nice. Yep. So character is the behavioral expression of your values, not the protection of your reputation. So I thought a good question to ask is, did your race behavior match your values? Maybe as an alternate from, did you win a race? As a investment in your resiliency and your skills, are the things that you really pride yourself on, are the things that are integral to who you are, did that show?
Okay. So we kind of predicted that it would be about this time when we got here. So
Mhm.
we're going to just kind of just quickly go through these last ideas, right? So just a few other things to think about related to, is this me or is this you?
I'll do this one if you want to do the next one. So one thing I want to make sure we threw in here if we were talking about resiliency and competition is the idea of naturals. Our cultural loves to say, oh, they're a natural. And as a culture, I think we do value hard work and effort, but we'll also just give this caveat in believing that some people just have a superior skill. Therefore, when you are in the start line with them, if you just are like, oh, they're just a natural, they're just gonna get it, you might as well just back up like 30 meters. We undervalue the discipline, the awareness, the curiosity, and the character that other people have, these skills that they have really honed in. It was really interesting because like Michael Phelps is known for winning a lot of medals at the Olympics in swimming. Physiologically, he is built like a swimmer. But what I didn't know is Muhammad Ali, the boxer, he actually had a lot of pretty terrible form and unconventional ways of boxing and was not proportionate to typical boxers, and yet he had outstanding performance because in his mind, he was going to figure out a way. He has like a few quotes that are like, if I can't beat them in size and strength, I'm gonna beat them mentally. And so we can accidentally just like check this box that we are already inferior with this by focusing on someone's natural ability or perceived our assumption of their natural ability, and that sabotages our resilience.
Okay, me?
Yep.
Except for Rory, I can't do this. Try to pronounce that name.
I can't read it.
Sisters and
Right.
Yeah. So Sheikh sent me.
yeah.
Did I get it right there? Did you well? Good. You ever have this, they call it in the zone, right? where you're so engaged in some activity that you don't even notice bees. And you kind of lose all sense of time, right? And maybe you've been doing something for 3 hours and it feels like just an instant has passed by. A lot of times when you're reading, when this happens as an athlete, it's an extraordinary experience. You are thriving when this happens. This is when you are really performing better than you have previously. And it turns out these are things that you can learn how to do. You can't turn it on like a light switch, but there are things that you can do to help maximize those flow experiences.
Do you want to go to the next?
I'm sorry?
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, is this you?
For emotional regulation?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good, I thought so. I have nothing to say.
Yes, it's my slide because I love, emotional regulation was my second value, or self-regulation.
Yeah, okay.
Self-regulation. Emotional regulation is huge when it comes to resiliency. We don't have a ton of time to talk about it now. It would be a great potential maybe next presentation if we want to do it. Because there are specific strategies that you can learn in the moment to be able to notice your feelings and then not allow your behavior to be in reaction to your emotion, but in response. And there's a huge difference between those two words and then the outcome thereafter. But I won't say any more than that, other than emotional regulation is very important.
All right.
Hmm? Questions?
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions? You can.
Do you have, so, you guys covered a lot of things, and it seems kind of overwhelming to try to implement like everything all at once. Do you have a recommendation for like, take this, start with one idea, or implement this one thing first and then see how it goes?
You
Or
give
any
one,
advice on that?
you give one, and I'll give one. Right?
Okay.
So,
So we'll each give an answer to that. So my idea would be you just start with increasing your awareness. So you just set an intention to check in with yourself and just there. Was your mind anxious? How did you feel? What did you do? And that's naturally going to flow into your curiosity. And then from there, you're probably naturally going to start to get a little bit more disciplined with things if you want them to change. And then from that, I think you'll recognize your values on what you hold from that. So that would be my response.
yeah, that's a terrific response, right? Because awareness came up so many times.
Mm-hmm.
If I can go in a little bit of a different kind of answer, not one that cuts across so much of what we said. I personally am a huge fan of self-determination. I am self-determined in almost everything, right? I never feel like I'm forced to do things. I choose to do the things, even the things that I have to do. It works for me. And so I would focus on that as well.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
That's like a superpower. You can figure out how to do it.
What'd you say, Maureen?
I said it's like a superpower if you can figure out how to do it. Like, I hate grading, but if I think about autonomy, like I choose the assignments that I give my students, I choose the time that I get to grade.
Yep.
I choose what comments I decide to make. Like,
Right, and to tie other things together, so the character strengths, helpfulness is one that's very high for me, and so yeah, I hate grading too, but it's important for me to be helpful. So
Mm-hmm. Well, and like your brain hears you. So if like you say, ugh, I have to go grade papers, and I'm just using yours. Like your brain hears that, or I'll be like, ugh, I have to go write all these notes, right? And because it's like, it feels like the busy work afterwards when you want to go do something else, because our brains always just want to be doing things that are fun. They're like, fun. So even if you switch the verbiage and say like, oh, I get to do this. I get to do this for the next 30 minutes. Initially, your emotional response is probably going to be like, feel like slightly ridiculous, but over time it does switch over, and you're like, oh yeah, I get to do this.
On the mountain last year, I was like, I signed up for this. I signed up for this.
I chose this.
Yeah, or when entering people, I'm like, you paid good money for this. It's a
Uh-huh.
professional activity.
Yep. The pain cave is something that I'm sure we've all heard about, and I'll just go back to the Courtney DeWalter I like laid in bed to watch like 3 documentaries. It was great. And she had in there about how she doesn't just want to find the pain cave. She wants to find the deepest point of it, because she really just wants to like understand herself. And I was like, what a really cool, it had nothing to do with like, I want to see what my performance is, and I want to see, it was like, oh, I just really want to be in that deep place, and so when I'm running, that I'm even looking for that. Like, I'm not going for when everything feels really great. I'm going for the point when my brain is like, ugh, maybe I want to be done with this all hurts. And then that's where I want to learn how to thrive. And I was like, that seems like a great goal. But I liked it because it wasn't about pacing, it wasn't about beating people, it was all just about who she's becoming. And it works really well for her. So.
I have a question about the presentation. There was one, I didn't want to bring it up at the time, but there was one part where there was a quote that was written as if this is something you don't want to be doing. And it said like, look how much better I am than I was last year. And I feel like that's my coping mechanism for my whole life. So I'm like, oh, am I doing it wrong?
I remember that. Yeah, I thought that was the thing
Oh,
you're supposed to challenge.
Yeah, that's what you can use to challenge
Yeah,
it.
you are supposed to do
You
that.
are supposed to do that. Yes.
Did we say that? Yeah, that's a way to dispel the negative parts. Yeah.
Yes. No, the D was it's like the way you can look at it differently in order to give that more like positive side of it. So you are, yes, I did this better than last week, than last year, and so forth. Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it was fun. Huh?
They want triple pounds.
She did. Yeah.
I gotta change that.
I had everyone stretching like.